Hi, everybody. It's a great opportunity to have this type of opportunity to introduce waste management business and international financing. I went to many different conferences and lectures, and many cases it was so boring, and it is so theoretical. So today, I'd like to emphasize more practical, and when you folks go to the real field and the real world, how to secure the financings and actually how to make a business. So let's start. First of all, waste management business. It is today I'm trying to emphasize it more solid waste management, which nowadays the waste to energy is the trend. Many different countries, especially underdeveloped countries, they show tremendous interest in waste to the energy, especially this renewable energy area. That's a so-called hot business field. And of course, I see some of the folks came from the underdeveloped countries, and for them, this waste treatment plant, this is very, very important because in Korea, long time ago, we just disposed the waste and without any protection. And later on, almost every country, including Korea, spent so much money to clean up that mess. And it cost actually 10 times more money to clean up those waste instead of when you first treat it right. And another one is CDM business. I'm sure you folks, some of them heard about greenhouse gas. I'm trying to not to go too deep about this CDM business because it's a kind of a dying. The business was very hot a few years ago, but now the business is gradually just fading away from the market. And nowadays, another field I want to emphasize is waste recycling, because waste recycling is directly related to this renewable energy. And also the waste recycling is very important for some of the underdeveloped countries, because when you go to the actual landfill waste disposal area, there is so many scavengers, so many people living out of those wasteland. So this waste recycling is one way to create the job, which many cases when you're making a social plan, this creates a job and you can meet social mitigation, especially related to financing. This is a very typical solid waste composition. Okay, this particular data is very similar from Vietnam or Indonesia and those Southeast Asia and Central America and some of the South America got a very similar type of waste composition. It's a little bit different than developed countries. For example, Korea do not have that many organic composition. The reason being is they do the source separation, which means like food waste, they collect separately, and non-organic waste, they collect separately. Can and those things, they collect separately. But however, still there is a lot of underdeveloped countries. Their solid waste composition is almost same as like this. This is important. I like to emphasize it, the organic waste composition, because that organic waste composition you can turn into the money later on. Okay? And here, there is a couple of other things I want to emphasize it, is this plastic, 11.8%. That's a main heat source, energy source. So remember this particular chart, and then later on when I explain to the possible business field, you folks can understand much easier. Waste management system is basically, there is a variety of waste, solid waste. The most typical one is municipal solid waste, and non-hazardous industrial solid waste, and hazardous solid waste, and hospital waste, and construction waste. In here today, I like to emphasize it more in municipal solid waste, and how to treat those municipal solid waste, what type of treatment is available, and which type is applicable to each different countries, and how to create a business out of those type of treatment. And integrated solid waste management is basically, the first option is how to reduce the waste generation. It's everybody consider we can reduce the waste, but fact is if you having a higher income, you actually produce more waste. So it's very hard to reduce the waste in the beginning. Then next question is, how do we reuse the materials? Because long time ago, it's a waste, it's just a waste. It's just a headache. But nowadays, waste become money. And the waste provides the opportunity to create a business. And recycling and the recovering material is actually the goal you are trying to achieve. Okay? And combustion for energy recovery, this is the area nowadays very, very popular, which we call the alternative energy and green energy area. The main reason I like to emphasize this combustion for energy recovery section is because there is a lot of money, which means funding is available in almost every country and the World Bank and everywhere. So if you planning to do any kind of, when you go back to your country, if you go to the foreign country and create some type of business, okay, I want you to especially pay attention to this energy recovery section. Now, the first thing when you receive the municipal waste, the first process you go through is material separation. Okay? This is a very typical material separation machines and field, how they do it. And in here, the manual sorting, especially the third world countries, when they're making a plan how to dispose the waste, how to recover how to reuse the waste, I want you to pay attention to this manual sorting, because there is many ways you can sort the waste. For example, this is all automated machine separation. It costs a lot of money, but basically need not that much manpower. However, I like to emphasize it in a manual sorting more because, as I said earlier, there are many waste landfill, non-sanitary landfill. There is so many people living there. Okay, so if you want to modernize it, and you go to the, for example, like Indonesia, Bantar Gebang landfill, there was almost like 7,000–8,000 people living out of the landfill. And if you just bring those, all automated sorting machines, there is no way those people to go, no place to go. So you have to create a job. So some of you, I'm sure when you go back to the, like a certain position in your country, then when you're making a plan to how to handle the waste management, please consider this particular manual sorting area. So in turn, you create a better atmosphere and give them a job, more and higher income to them. So this is not a modern technology, but because of the social mitigation, you folks have to consider when you create this kind of jobs. And why we do those, sorting and everything is you're trying to making an energy source, which is RDF or RPF, okay? And this is one of the section you create, it is one of the section you have to go through to create the energy, right before to create the energy. Because in many cases, when you make this kind of RDF or RPF, you can mobilize this particular ones. You can ship it to the other places in a factory area or industrial zone area and create another business, energy business. RDF and the RPF is basically it's a high calorie things which you can collect from the waste. Okay, you can convert into the energy, and I'm not going through all the details about this. Now, the next thing is, once you sort it, next thing is you have to consider how to dispose it, and it requires a landfilling. This is very typical non-sanitary landfill in many countries, Africa, Southeast Asia, East Europe, Central America, and South America. They still dispose the waste like this, okay? And to dispose properly, you have to make a sanitary landfill, like this type. The reason you do that is when you make this kind of disposal, just a non-sanitary landfill, you cannot collect the gas and you cannot utilize those 65% of the organic waste which you can convert into the energy. So to do that, you have to make this type of a sanitary landfill. Not only that, in long run, it reduced waste treatment cost. Because if you dispose waste like this, right now it costs you nothing. However, it starts contaminating the land. Later on, if you want to clean up, and this kind of landfill, it costs you almost 3 to 10 times more money. Okay? So if you work for the government or making a plan for the government, I want you to consider this. Not only that, why you make this type of a sanitary landfill is, a lot of countries, when they're signing WTO, World Trade Organization, one of the requirements is you have to properly dispose your waste. For example, in 1997, Vietnam signed the WTO. They got a 5 or 7 years, grace period. But after that, they have to start building those type of landfills and those things. So a lot of folks in here, if you're looking for some business opportunity, this is one of the fields. When you go back to your country, or if you approach other countries, this is one of the main fields you can start a business. And sanitary landfill is basically the structures like this. And one of the new technology I'd like to introduce you is leach irrigation. When you're making a landfill produces the wastewater, which we call the leach. Okay? And one of the hardest thing is to treat the leach, and it costs a lot of money. And this leach irrigation is, you treat it certain way, like a minimum requirement of treatment, and then give it to the trees. And a lot of leachate contains nitrogen, which it contaminates the like a water source. However, it's good for the trees. It accelerates the growth of the trees. So actually, this is one of the natural way. Not only that, I'd like to introduce this particular system is in Barrio Bungta, we used those irrigation system, but this particular trees and everything is a top of used to be the old waste landfill site. Okay? When you're making a new landfill in an old landfill, you're using there's soil and making a cover and put the top of the waste. You're making this type of irrigation to treat the leachate. It's one of the new technology I'd like to introduce you folks. So when you go back and have opportunity, consider this type of technology, which is very, very economical and very environmental friendly. Another one is, this is also new technology, anaerobic treatment of the solid waste. It's a reusable landfill. As I said, in East Asia and Central America and South America, there is a huge portion of organic waste. Organic waste can convert into the fertilizer. Okay? And when you separate the organic waste and put it this type of anaerobic digesting type of landfill, in 3 or 4 years, it just turns into the organic fertilizer. Okay, and once it is done, you take it out and use it fertilizer and put it back again. It's like a reusable landfill and producing a large-scale organic fertilizer. It's a very, very profitable because not only that, this one produces the gas, landfill gas, which you can utilize it to produce the electricity or heat source for the energy in many different ways. And another one is this organic, the sewage sludge and food waste and animal manure type. This is a hydrolyzer. What it is it break down the cells and making a fuel source or produce the gas generation. It's a kind of a new technology, but very expensive. This type of technology is good for developed countries, but still not applicable in developed countries, underdeveloped countries. Another one is composting. I'm sure you folks heard about it, using a trash to making a composting material, which is organic fertilizer. But existing composting method has a lot of problem because thin film, such as very thin plastic, those ones, it's very hard to separate it. So long run, it contaminates the land. So composting is very good theoretically, but practically, it's not doable. Especially the third world countries, the government officials, they're making a huge mistake to going through this particular composting because it's cheap to build. And theoretically, once you convert into the composting material, hey, you can sell it or you can give away. However, in long run, because you cannot separate those thin films like a small plastics and those things, in the long run, 3 or 4 years, it just contaminates the more land. So I just put it in here. It sounds good, but I want to give you a warning, be careful. When you're planning, when you're making when you hear some of the waste management and the any kind of proposals. If you contain this one, realistically, it's very dangerous one. And another one is, as I said, all this landfill stuff is basically one of the income source is when you build a landfill and when you put the organic waste in a landfill, either reusable landfill or just a plain landfill, it produces the gas, methane gas. And the CDM itself is basically very simple. The methane gas, it affects it affects the heat blocking section is, let's consider it's a 21. When you burn the methane and convert into the CO2, CO2 only blocks it 1. So there is a 20 tons of carbon credit. And once you get those carbon credit, you're supposed to trade and sell. Okay? So it was a very hot business, but it's dying because of CER, we call the carbon credit. Not that many people want to buy anymore. So carbon credit price used to be $21, $23. Now it's $5, $6. And it keep on going down. So if you are government officers, if you are planning to base on the CDM, it's not a right way. However, using a landfill gas to produce the electricity or using another energy source, that's a right approach. Okay? And this is very, very, the return, IRR, is very good compared to anything. The next one is incinerator. I'm sure you folks know all about this. The incinerator is a very good method to dispose of any kind of solid waste. Especially hazardous waste, this is one of the best way. Okay? However, the unit cost of treating the waste for the, the combustion, it's around 3 to 4 times higher than landfilling. Let me give you one good example. For example, to combust incinerating waste, it costs you average $40 to $45, $50 per ton. But if you want to landfill it, the cost is around $12 to $15. Okay? So still, a lot of countries prefer to go to the landfilling. And the reason being is their budget is just limited. And when you go to the actual field, you will find that out. And heat separation technology, this is a most modern and new technology. What it is when you put the waste in there and you provide very high pressure and heat and separates it out, and the paper become, you can collect the fibers out of it. And those is shortwave fibers. You can making like boxes and those ones, but it's very expensive. And this is maybe in Korea, Japan, or United States, or Europe. This particular technology can consider. Okay, so I'm just introducing you all different methods of how to treat the waste. Now, another one is just hazardous waste. Hazardous waste, the treatment cost is very high. For example, municipal waste is average like $20, let's say. The hazardous waste is average $200. Okay, so this hazardous waste management is a good business. And there is a certain plasma gasification type. The initial cost is very high, but you can get rid of it almost, whatever the outcome is almost near to nothing. So this plasma is good for like a nuclear waste disposal, PCM and those kind of very toxic area. This is a good way to dispose of. And the general incineration, I already explained to you. And secure landfill, one of the cheapest way to handle the hazardous waste is hazardous waste landfill. Now, in hazardous waste, their waste water, the treatment is so difficult and very, very expensive because it varies so much based on whatever the incoming hazardous waste. So, one of the new methods is getting very popular is putting in an indoor waste landfill, which is you cover with this air dome. Okay. Once you build the air dome, you put the landfill, you cover the landfill with the air dome, and if you don't need any, there is no leach coming out. Okay, so you don't need to treat any kind of leach treatment and maintenance costs. So this is one of the methods I like to introduce you, especially when you treat the hazardous waste, one of the economical way. And I don't want to go through any more waste treatment method. I think I explained to you earlier enough, and I don't want to go through the technical stuff. Now, I want to introduce you what is the trend, in every different countries, and especially in business area. Nowadays, most the hottest thing is PPP. What it is private and public partnership. I'm sure you folks have heard about this type of business, especially basic infrastructure, such as wastewater treatment, bridge, road, port, airport, in many different areas. Because government no longer has enough money, or they do not have fund immediately to build any kind of basic infrastructure. What they usually do is they like to provide a certain guarantee and bring the inviting private investment. So PPP is one of the most popular Africa and Southeast Asia and Central America and those kind of developed countries. This is the method that they're using most commonly to invite the foreign investment. And in very typical PPP format, usually government and the private provides basically the money and know-how. Okay, any business, especially waste business or like an infrastructure business. And it's important is allocating various risks, how to hedge the risks, okay? And how much government we're gonna take a risk and how much private industry we're gonna take a risk. Basically, private industry knows how to operate it and how to manage it, and it's their investment. So whatever they know, they take a risk. And government minimize their risk. For example, in a waste area, they only provide the guarantees, the treatment fee, and waste. In other things, in many different cases, many different ways, they're separating the risk. And that's one of the risk hedge method. And let me go. And financing and the feasibility. Because I just explained to you about the waste management, but I'm partially sure some of you folks is not only interesting about waste management, but some other field and many different business aspects. And nowadays, like for example, in a construction company who is involved in there, they usually go for the government, government contracts. But nowadays, the government contract is fading away. Nowadays, most of the government projects or any kind of infrastructure projects is either BTL, build and transfer and lease, or BOT or BO format. I want you to especially understand this particular format. And this all requires a financing. Okay? Especially nowadays, to getting international financing, it's very, very difficult. Especially long-term financing, it's not that many funding sources available. So today I'm trying to introduce you what's available, what is the procedure, how to secure that. Because many projects, for example, if there is 100 projects, only 5% survive and actually make it. Around 95% failure. You know why the 95% failure? Among them, around 90% is due to non-financeable, with many different reasons. So when you approach any kind of a project, most important thing is you have to remember, the first thing is, how can I get the financing? If you solve the financing, you are almost 70–80% successful. Okay? I don't want to go through the requirements and everything, but the financing sources nowadays, especially when you are looking into the infrastructure and long-term financing, there is a couple of sources. One is ADB, one is IFC, one is OPIC, and there is a lot of institute, other investors, and private sector. But if it is more than 20 years, more than actually 10 years in a long-term financing, some of the private bankers is not that, actually the private bankers do not want to do it. I can give you that straight. Usually this type of semi-government type international organization of source is the best way to accommodate it and start the financing. And as one of the example, I'd like to introduce this particular OPIC. It's an Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which is a part of the US government, provides a third world country financing. And I'm trying to introduce you some of their methods, how to secure their, the financing. Because ADB, IFC, and OPIC, World Bank, well, World Bank is a little bit different. But their approach, how to secure their money, is the method and the requirement is almost same. So as one example, I'd like to introduce you about the OPIC. The OPIC usually, one particular project, each one project, they provide the financing up to $350 million per project. If it is a brand new business, you never had any kind of experience before, it's the first time of the business, they provide up to 65% of the financing. But if you are done before and it's the extension or related business, they provide up to 75% of the financing. The maximum term is, the shortest term is 3 years, maximum up to 20 years. You can extend up to 25 years. And I'd like to emphasize one of this particular 20 years section, because many infrastructures, you might require the very long-term financing. And a lot of private banking area, they do not provide those type of long-term financing. That's a reality. And these loans are disputed quarterly, and what it is US Treasury plus 3%, which means if it is US Treasury for 1 year is only 0.5% or 0.25%, and the 3%, so actually it's a 3.5% or something like that. If it is 20 years US Treasury, is 2.96%. So it's like 5.96% in the long term. And 20 years fixed rate for less than 6%, that's a very, very good. And not only that, when you folks making any kind of this type of feasibility studies, planning, the interest rate will actually kill the project or make the project. So especially in a long-term project, especially infrastructure and those areas, I want you to utilize either OPIC or IFC and those kind of international institute instead of a private, especially when you go to the third world countries. In the third world countries, because of the country risk. For example, Zambia, the interest rate is, believe it or not, is 18%. And if you go to the Zambia using this type of funding, you can go with the 6%. The difference is so huge. So you have to remember this type of institute, how to approach and what they require. Okay? And the OPIC provides ports, housing, landfill, and roads, basically low-income housing. They provide the financing almost everywhere, except the luxury item or like gambling and those kind of antisocial projects. Luxury project is not antisocial, but luxury items, they usually have a tendency not to provide the financing. And OPIC is very, very friendly with Africa. Because Barack Obama became a president, they devoted so much money to Africa, but Africa still do not using that much money out of OPIC. And also, the Indonesia has right now, the OPIC has around $4 billion set aside for the projects, but they are not using that much. Okay? And OPIC is also very friendly to providing financings for the Central America and South America. And another one, I want you to folks I want you to aware is former Soviet Union countries. It's near to impossible to finance it. And current world atmosphere, okay? Such as Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and those kind of countries. You have a very nice project. The project is very lucrative, but how can I get financing? The answer is no. You cannot get it because of the country risk and because of the effects, like a foreign exchange risk and those kind of type. Okay, it's a very, very limited. The financing source. So this is a good, organization. You should utilize it if you are planning to go to any kind of business in those kind of countries. The OPIC so far, they provide around $200 billion so far, around 4,000 different projects. And last year, the OPIC has around $28 billion they didn't use. They supposed to use. So they got plenty of money if you got a project is right. The loan process and the pre-application stage, I will go through the very fast because this is when you folks go to the actual field and trying to get the financing, it's not just OPIC, but in a private bank or any kind of bank you approach, any kind of finance institute, you have to prepare this type of stuff. I'm trying to explain to you the procedure. First, you have to make a business proposal. And in order to prove that you really have this kind of business is usually minimum requirement is MOU, memorandum of understanding. If there is a memorandum of agreement, it's even better. And the contract, it's even better. Okay? And feasibility study, which means in feasibility study, this is the most important. How you do the feasibility study is the key. So when you're making any kind of plan, make sure you use the proper feasibility study institute and get the credibility. Because based on the feasibility study, IM and every application status and the decision is based on this feasibility study. And the most important is this offtake, which means when you produce a certain type of machine, do you have a place to sell? If you have, for example, landfill process, okay, who is your customer? If your government guarantees it, good. Then you're already off the offtake, okay? Now, when you go to the government guarantee, is it the municipal guarantee or city guarantee or central government guarantee? That's a credit issue, which you can talk about later. But if you got the offtake, which means you have a buyer, or you have income sources guaranteed, then you finished already 50%, your business proposal or whatever, at least you've already finished more than 50%. So the things you have to really take care of it is this offtake. And this one have to reflect the feasibility properly. Then that's one certain way you can secure the financing. And the rest of them is land, term sheet, contractor, environment impact assessment, and conditions. In here, I especially emphasize the EIA. That's an environment impact assessment, and there is like social mitigation, economical impact, and all different things. If you folks have a chance, I want you to go to the World Bank standard, World Bank homepage, and look into the World Bank standard. Because a lot of this international financing, they are based on World Bank standard. So next one is this is just regularly what they need in order to process the application. And in here, economic and social impact of the project on the local community. This is the one I mentioned it earlier about those scavengers who live off the landfill. That's only limited to the landfill case. But if you want to build a hydraulic power plant, okay, there is some fishermen who may leave, and then when you make a dam, okay, they might lose their living. Fishing sources or whatever. And those ones, when you make a plan, the social impact and the environmental impact, you have to be very, very careful. Because in practice, everything else is very nice. It's a very lucrative, you can make money to making a payment to the bank, no problem whatsoever. But in many cases, the application is denied because of these things. In social impact in Korean words is minwon. And some of the Korean people in here understand the minwon is very, very important. Most of the bank requires usually 3 years of financial statement, and also another one important thing is in a license permit and the approval of a host country of the government. One of the most important thing is when you go to those kind of foreign countries, just do not consider you can get the license and those permits easily. Because reality is every country has a different regulation. For example, in Vietnam, in a landfill, the locals have the 49%. Either they invest a single penny or not. Okay? And 51% have to be foreign. And in here, when you're making a deal with a certain government projects, I want you to be very, very careful is the tax area. Okay? For example, in Brazil, the import tax is so high. If you do not consider that, if you do not get a government permit, the import tax zero, okay, your whole project structure changes. So those ones you have to be very, very considered. Okay? And the financial projection, IM and those ones, it all requires. And this one, let me explain to you nowadays, very, very practical how to you making a judgment if it is a financeable or not. For example, in Africa, underdeveloped countries, okay, if you require any kind of international investment, the equity portion I'm talking about, usually their minimum requirement is 15% and up. And some of the very high-risk countries, they require 25% IRR. Okay? So when you make a plan, the information I just gave it to you, I want you to consider. For example, same type of investment, if you're making A+ above countries such as Korea, the minimum requirement IRR is around 7-8%. But if you go to the Myanmar and those countries, it requires 25% IRR. So if you are willing to pay and your project can pay 25% more and those kind of high return, you can find the money easily in those countries. But if it is not, if your IRR is only like a 12% or something like that, it's a very good return actually. But if your location of the country is not the developed countries, for example, it's like a Mozambique somewhere, you cannot find the money with those kind of IRR. So that's a very practical information and the current market information. And this is just engineering requirement, investment offers. And those ones, I think if you needed this kind of information, you can ask for the University of Korea to provide this type of information later. And about KEBC, I'm not going to go through anymore. Okay? Thank you very much, everybody.